Welcome to For the Love of Money Talk Show. I'm your host, EMILIO, KALMERA, and we're here on 98.1 Pearl FM. Money makes the world go round, folks. And today's topic is going to be definitely hitting on that money issue. There was a gentleman that said, money shall decide the fate of mankind, and that's so true. In today's program, you will see why that statement is so relevant even today, as it was in the past. Had a good week so far. We was meeting with the IMF delegation, and they're on the island doing interviews with different stakeholders. So they had meetings with the Bankers Association, some of the big hotels, and so forth, and airport as well. You know, all the stakeholders that has a stake to do in the economy. And the two main key things that came out of those meetings was the airport situation and the stability in government. Those were the two major concerns from all the stakeholders that we spoke to together with the IMF. In one of the particular meetings, one of the IMF delegates turned around and said, "This is depressing." So the first time because we had them here on the island a few times already, and this is the first time I heard one of them said, "This is depressing," and indeed it is depressing. One of the other things that came up was the inflation rates, which we have. There's a document. I'm not too sure where it's coming from. I'm not sure it's from Central Bank or from our Statistics Bureau. It's saying that the inflation rate is, I think, 0.6%, whereas that's IMF is saying that's not possible, and some of the stakeholders are saying that's not possible either. And one of the IMF persons said that our inflation rate should be more in line with the United States inflation rate, so it can never be 0.6%. And there was some jokes in one of the meetings. If you go to the shop, you come up with 2 small bags of groceries, you're going to be up in the $300 range just for a few items. So they can never see how our inflation rate could be 0.6%. That's been said. I think our statistics department has some improvements to undergo, and so because it's not clear how they came to that 0.6%. Probably they have their reasoning, but of course we need to see how they determine that. But in all the meetings that we had, there was 2 I call it elephants in the room that was not mentioned. One of them was a possible recession in America, because if America goes into a recession, we're going to feel the pinch even more, but that was never brought up in any of the meetings. Also, the risk when it comes to any major hurricanes, that was not brought up as well. Also, for this week, I got like 3 requests almost in the same space of time from institutions requesting me to give financial literacy services in terms of lecture, workshop, and in particular, one of them was my old high school, who requested specifically a budgeting workshop for the teachers who seems to be having some hard times when it comes to the budgeting aspect, likely because of cost of living going up, etc. And I had to refuse that one because of the short notice. However, this has become a problem from a long time ago. I know another institution that was saying a lot of their staff was asking for advances, and you can see when you start seeing these type of trends, you have to start paying attention, because it definitely signals something is happening and something is wrong. With the Bankers Association, they were saying that their retail clients is doing okay, but the commercial clients, business has been declining. However, you can see that persons probably are paying their dues and paying back their banks accordingly, but they're struggling. And so this is something to watch, because when you look at one end, where the bank is saying, the persons are paying, the obligations properly from the consumer point of view, retail point of view, and here on the other end, I'm seeing requests for financial literacy and budgeting. It says that there's a disconnect going on here, and eventually they're going to pan out negatively, especially since employees in St. Martin don't really raise the wages accordingly. And civil servants is one of the major expenditures, persons who spend money, and major, because government hire a number of civil servants. If their having received a raise and over from since 2012, and the obligations are there, eventually they're gonna affect the economy in a negative way. So one of the things I'm going to be doing, though, as we know, we also have a firm that does recruitment and also training. I take care of the training part. Unfortunately, we'll be closing up shop, not from a point of view of closing down the business, but we're going to give up the location and try to go completely online, because it's reached to a point where our services are not are expensive, but people just can't even afford it. Like, for example, we have a service that is $150. Somebody asking to pay $50 as an example. So that being said, having a location and persons can't afford the courses, so it doesn't really make any sense to keep the place open. So we decided that we have to close up the location and then try to go completely online. And I mean, there will be a loss of that personal touch. However, in business, you cannot keep paying for something and the services are not being paid for, and you have bills to pay. So at some point, you have to, make a business decision. Also, there was an article I wrote, and as per 1:34 p.m. today, November 7, 2019, it had 910 hits. That's amazing. I've never written an article in St. Martin that went past 900 hits. Matter of fact, it never even passed 400 hits. So it seems to be a pretty good article. It's part one. It's entitled, "Can Government Spend Better Than You?" And so I was pretty shocked to see the number of hits that got. And also on the last program I was on, I was invited by Ori Gibbs to be on his program. That excerpt, he didn't post the whole program. He posted I think about 5 minutes of it, and that program got, last time I checked, which was about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, it was over 500 something hits. So that's impressive. I've never seen that happen all the time that I was given interviews and writing articles. So something is definitely changing, I'm hoping. Today's topic is going to deal a lot again with the inequality aspects and what is bringing and what is causing a number of problems throughout the whole world. You see it in places like Japan, America, and so forth, that this inequality situation is basically one of the oldest and fatal elements of our republics, according to the Plutarch. Plutarch said an imbalance between the rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal elements of our republics. And he observed this in the first century Greek history. He's a first century Greek historian, and way back in those times, he, this was pinpointed. And there was another gentleman that said, "Profit doesn't want change. Change, abundance, and sustainability and efficiency are the enemies of profit." This was written by a guy named Peter Joseph, and it is so true, because if you're seeing, I saw like the other day that Walmart CEO earning like between $14-15 to $20 million a year, and the average worker in Walmart is nowhere close to that. They're probably earning maybe $34,000 for the year. And so they say the gap between CEOs' pay and normal salary workers has grown by like 5,000 to 10,000 in terms of difference, not percent, but times, and that's alarming. And the rich seems to be getting richer. The 1% seems to be getting more of the wealth and so forth. So that inequality has been growing for a number of years. One of the things that I'm very bad at names, but there's two names that I always remember, which one of them is Thomas Jefferson, and the other one is Andrew Jackson. And they are so instrumental about explaining a lot of what's happening today. And these was guys living back in the 1800s and so forth, and they already foresaw a lot of the issues that we would have today. Thomas Jefferson in particular, he was against low wages. He spoke out adamantly about it, and he said, for example, if you don't pay people the right wages or the high wages, how would they buy the higher wage product? And so what happened, you see, in some point, it used to be like that, but there was a deviation of that, I think, after the World War or whatever, and you start seeing that person's wages start to diminish in comparison to the cost of living. And that's ironic, because if your prices of goods and services are going up and my wages are stagnant or relatively going downwards, how would I buy the higher wage? That's when the credit issue came into being. That's when persons came up with the layaway situation, where you buy on credit, and that's how the credit bubble started to come into play, where you will borrow money now to supplement the shortfall in your wages, and that of course has caused a number of problems throughout the history. We all have the bubble, the crisis, the debt crisis. All over the world there's debt crisis. Sovereign debt, personal debt has skyrocketed in comparison to the GDP, and that's becoming there's a number of problems all over the globe, and it's becoming really epidemic. That's another thing I want to talk about when we're talking about measuring wealth. Most countries, use, particularly IMF and those, use the term GDP. However, to me, GDP is a false measure of social health. To me, some of the good measures, some of the false measures of social health, so how do you measure it? One of them, of course, is gross domestic product is a false measure, in my opinion. Consumer price index is also a false measure. Stock market levels is a false measure. Economic growth is a false measure. Employment, globalization, free trade agreements, and so forth. These things doesn't really tell you much about, the true measure of social health. Some of the true measures, in my opinion, is disease rates. Also, how much disease, what is the status of the disease rates? Level of poverty, so poverty levels, wars, resource wastage, crime rates, literacy, social capital, educational performance, corruption, trust, conflicts, imprisonment rates, planetary depletion, drug use, environmental degradation. So these are true measures, because when you measure these things, and the worse they are, the worse your whole society is. Gross domestic product don't tell me anything. The gross domestic product keep rising, but inequality is growing, so it doesn't really tell me anything particular. It doesn't tell me the income distribution and the wealth distribution, because that's getting really, really bad. So absence of certain things, gross domestic product is a false measure in my view. Now, in this particular article, which was written back in the 24th of May 2006, this is a number of years ago. This is even before we went 10-10-10. And it says, again, an imbalance between rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal elements of all republics, observed Plutarch, the first century Greek historian. He was spot on in both his judgments. Inequality is older than capitalism. It can also be fatal to those on the wrong side of the equation, for reasons that go beyond the effects of being poor. The gap between rich and poor has become a critical issue in Europe and the U.S. In Europe and in the U.S. In many countries, notably in the U.K. and the U.S., it is on the increase. The last 4 years, economic growth in the U.S. has masked, and then it continues. But this was written since the 24th of May 2006, and you can see that from there, you see numerous articles coming out and saying that inequality is really, really bad for any country. Then it was Ray Dalio who said to tackle inequality, he says, tackle inequality or face violent revolution. So he came up with an article on November 5th, 2019 about this. Very interesting article. I'm not going to read it, but it's very interesting. And now we're going to get into a gentleman that named, what's his name here? His name is Nick Hanouer, funny name. And he basically had a TED Talk that was actually pulled off of TED because he made a few statements. He said, the rich people don't create jobs, and he actually put charts up that proved his point. And I guess one of the Republicans got upset and spoke to Ted, and Ted took it down. And then Ted got some pressure from, I guess, persons who saw it, and then it went back up, but I don't think it went back up for the full amount. So what we're going to play now, we're going to play the TED, at least part of it, the TED Talk that was pulled down by Ted because of concerns and so forth from a Republican Party.
It is astounding how significantly one idea can shape a society and its policies. Consider this one. If taxes on the rich go up, job creation will go down. This idea is an article of faith for Republicans and seldom challenged by Democrats, and has indeed shaped much of the economic landscape. But sometimes the ideas that we are certain are true are dead wrong. Consider that for thousands of years, humans believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. It's not, and an astronomer who still believed that it was would do some pretty terrible astronomy. Likewise, a policymaker who believes that the rich are job creators and therefore should not be taxed will do equally terrible policy. I have started or helped start dozens of companies and initially hired lots of people, but if there was no one around who could afford to buy what we had to sell, all those companies and all those jobs would have evaporated. That's why I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do businesses large or small. Jobs are a consequence of a circle of life-like feedback loop between customers and businesses. And only consumers can set in motion this virtuous cycle of increasing demand and hiring. In this sense, an ordinary consumer is more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. That's why when business people take credit for creating jobs, it's a little bit like squirrels taking credit for creating evolution. It's actually the other way around. Anyone who's ever run a business knows that hiring more people is a course of last resort for capitalists. It's what we do if and only if rising consumer demand requires it. And in this sense, calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous. That's why our existing policies are so upside down. When the biggest tax exemptions and the lowest tax rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is that the rich get richer. Since 1980, the share of income for the top 1% of Americans has more than tripled, while our effective tax rates have gone down by 50%. If it was true that lower taxes for the rich and more wealth for the wealthy led to job creation, today we would be drowning in jobs. And thank you. And yet, unemployment and underemployment is at record highs. Another reason that this idea is so wrong-headed is that there can never be enough super rich people to power a great economy. Somebody like me makes hundreds or thousands of times as much as the median American, but I don't buy hundreds or thousands of times as much stuff. My family owns 3 cars, not 3,000. I buy a few pairs of pants and shirts a year like most American men. Occasionally we go out to eat with friends. I can't buy enough of anything to make up for the fact that millions of unemployed and underemployed Americans can't buy any new cars, any clothes, or enjoy any meals out. Nor can I make up for the falling consumption of the vast majority of middle-class families that are barely squeaking by, buried by spiraling costs and trapped by stagnant or declining wages. Here's an incredible fact, that if the typical American family still retained the same share of income that they did in 1970, they'd earn like $45,000 more a year. Imagine what our economy would be like if that were the case. Significant privileges have come to people like me, capitalists, for being perceived as job creators at the center of the economic universe, and the language and metaphors we use to defend the current economic and social arrangements is telling. It's a small jump from job creator to the creator. This language obviously wasn't, this language was not chosen by accident. And it's only honest to admit that when somebody like me calls themselves a job creator, we're not just describing how the economy works, but more particularly, we're making a claim on status and privileges that we deserve. Speaking of special privileges, the extraordinary differential between the 15% tax rate that capitalists pay on carried interest, dividends, and capital gains, and the 35% top marginal rate on work that ordinary Americans pay, is kind of hard to justify without a touch of deification. We've had it backwards for the last 30 years. Rich people like me don't create jobs. Jobs are a consequence of an ecosystemic feedback loop between customers and businesses. And when the middle class thrives, businesses grow and hire, and owners profit. That's why taxing the rich to pay for investments that benefit all is such a fantastic deal for the middle class and the rich. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's an idea worth spreading. In a capitalist economy, the true job creators are middle-class consumers. And taxing the rich to make investments that make the middle class grow and thrive is the single shrewdest thing we can do for the middle class, for the poor, and for the rich. Thank you.
Yes. So this was the TED Talk that was actually taken down. And this uber wealthy venture capitalist gave a TED Talk saying people don't create jobs. And TED actually refused to post it. Now, as the war, this is the article that was published on May 16, 2012. He said, as the war over income inequality wages on, super rich Seattle entrepreneur Nick Hanauer has been raising the hackles of his fellow one-percenters, exposing the contrarian argument that rich people don't actually create jobs. The position is controversial, so much so that TED is refused to post a talk that Hanauer gave on the subject. This is what Hanauer said. To recap, he said, I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do business, large or small. What does lead to more employment is a circle of life like feedback loop between customers and businesses. And only consumers can set in motion this virtuous cycle of increasing demand and hiring. In this sense, an ordinary middle-class consumer is far more of a job creator than a capitalist like me. So when business people take credit for creating jobs, it's a little like squirrels taking credit for creating evolution. In fact, it's the other way around. Anyone who's ever run a business knows that hiring people is a capitalist course of last resort, something we do only when increasing customer demand requires it. In this sense, calling ourselves job creators just inaccurately calling ourselves job creators isn't just inaccurate, it's disingenuous. That's why our current policies are upside down. When you have a tax system in which most of the exemptions and the lowest rates benefit the richest, all in the name of job creation, all that happens is that the rich get richer. So that's part of the reasons for inequality. There's another video that actually was talking about the same thing that TED took down, and they was explaining that it's really unfair. So in this particular video, you will see a little discussion going on about why it was unfair to take down the TED Talk from this gentleman.
Is in the news because apparently there was one gentleman by the name of Nick Hanauer, he's a venture capitalist, who gave a speech on the disparity of wealth here in the country, right? So there's the ultra rich and of course they're the super poor. And
can I just say, Nick Hanauer, friend of the show, he's been on the Young Turks before, and he's terrific because he's one of those guys who understands and appreciates the wealth that he has. He made it in all the right ways. His company got bought. He made a lot of money, paid his taxes, and thinks that that there's this wealth disparity, and it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the rich, it doesn't help the middle class, it doesn't help anybody in the country. So he's the perfect guy to give that speech.
Now, whenever someone gives a speech at TED, usually what happens is they'll put the speech up on YouTube, or they'll publish a transcript of the speech. That way, anyone who wasn't able to attend will have the ability to watch or read that speech. However, they made a conscious decision not to do so because they found his speech to be too politically charged. In fact, let me read you what the National Journal said. They said, TED officials just this month, May of 2012, told Hanauer that his remarks were both too controversial and too political for them to post. Also, one of the curators for TED said, Hanauer's talk probably ranks as one of the most politically controversial talks we've ever run, and we need to be really careful when to post it. The next week ain't right. Confidentially, we already have Melinda Gates on contraception going out. Sorry for the mixed messages on this.
So that's fascinating. So I guess they're saying that Melinda Gates on contraception is also political? What, like,
Political, too controversial.
but I mean, okay, is breathing political? Okay, most sane people believe that contraception is perfectly acceptable. In fact, 99% of sexually active women in the country use contraception. But what, we have to, because there's 1%, but it happens to be the 1% that's the head of the Republican Party, that we just can't even have a speech on contraception? And on wealth disparity, but that's a fact. That's a fact that we have horrible income inequality here. Is it politically charged to point out facts? And I guess it's almost Ted, in a way, saying that they're embarrassed for Republicans, because it's obviously the Republicans' fault.
I don't think they're embarrassed for Republicans. I think, if anything, they're afraid of offending Republicans. They're afraid of offending the corporations, the people who are receiving the huge tax cuts in this country. To attend the TED conference, you have to pay thousands of dollars. It's not a cheap event to attend. Let's keep that in mind.
That's a fair point. I hadn't thought of that, you know, and, you know, to what degree is TED considering that? We don't know, of course, right? But we do know that there is tremendous wealth inequality in this country, about the same level as right before the Great Depression, and that you'd almost be negligent not to point it out. If they look back, and TED does a wonderful series, you know, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying, and they have these great speeches, etc., and in a lot of ways it's a great documentation of where the country, where society, where the world was at that particular time. The record would be incomplete if you didn't have a speech on the enormous wealth disparity we have in this country and the huge consequences that flow from it.
Right, and Business Insider, by the way, I have to give them a lot of credit, because I don't know how they did it, but they somehow managed to get the slides from the presentation. Who knows, maybe Nick Hanauer leaked it to them. I don't know. That's just my guess. But the slides look great. You know, there's a slide about job creators showing that giving these rich people tax cuts doesn't necessarily create jobs. The evidence proves otherwise. And, you know, it seemed like a great speech, and I wish that we would have the ability to watch it. But if you didn't get the opportunity to see the speech, you can always go to Business Insider, and they have the slides for you.
All right, just go back to that last one for a second. You know, all these slides are terrific, but this is a great one because it shows you, look, when the effective tax rate on millionaires was 30%, unemployment was down at 5.6%. Now, that's in the mid-1990s. During the Clinton administration, things are going well, right? Now, in 2009, well, the effective tax rate on millionaires has gone all the way down to 22%. So it's gone, and remember, the whole point of lowering those taxes theoretically was we're going to create jobs, we're going to create jobs. They're the job creators. So if you give tax cuts to millionaires, it's okay because you'll benefit from it because you'll have more jobs. Show the slide one more time. That's not how it turned out. It turned out that we actually had much greater unemployment. Now, you can say there's a confluence of events, etc. I can get into all those events for you and show you how they're all connected. But one thing is for sure. They said if we did tax cuts for the rich, that we would have more jobs. We did not. Even if you think that the causes of the recession were otherwise. The tax cuts were supposed to help us, but they didn't. It's a fact. All those graphs show it. It's a fact. They didn't create more jobs. We have less jobs. It was a lie all along. It was a fairy tale told to make the rich feel better, and in fact, to make the politicians feel better as they took bribes from the rich and from corporations to lower their taxes so that they can go out and tell the public, oh no, it's okay, vote for us, and we're doing the right thing, because eventually it'll trickle down to you lesser people. But it didn't. It hurt us. And that's what Nick Hanauer wanted to point out, and apparently that's controversial, to point out facts.
That was a little interesting video there, and you should read the one from Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, it says, you either tackle inequality or face a violent revolution. Now, the last video actually touches on what Ray Dalio is saying. It's not even from Ray Dalio. These are different rich millionaires, billionaires rather, that's telling us these things, not even poor people, right? It's a billionaire investor, Ray Dalio, has called on U.S. politicians to declare the growing wealth gap a national emergency and take urgent steps to address it, or face the prospect of a violent revolution where we all are going to try to kill each other. I remember the song from, what's her name? I keep forgetting her name with the guitar, talking about a revolution. Tracy Chapman, I think her name is. She was so right. You better run, 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 run. Remember what she said, okay, coming home to roost. Now, in this last particular video, but nonetheless, you should definitely read that article from Ray Dalio. It was written on November 5th, 2019, sorry. That was recently. It says here, Ray Dalio, Tackle Inequality or Face a Violent Revolution. So Google it and try to read it. It's very, very interesting to read. In the last video now, it's going to touch on what Ray Dalio is saying. And it's very interesting to hear it coming from also a billionaire.
You probably don't know me, but I am one of those 0.01 percenters that you hear about and read about, and I am by any reasonable definition a plutocrat. And tonight, what I would like to do is speak directly to other plutocrats, to my people, because it feels like it's time for us all to have a chat. Like most plutocrats, I too am a proud and unapologetic capitalist. I have founded, co-founded, or funded over 30 companies across a range of industries. I was the first non-family investor in Amazon.com. I co-founded a company called The Quantive that we sold to Microsoft for $6.4 billion. My friends and I, we own a bank. I tell you this, unbelievable, right? I tell you this to show that my life is like most plutocrats. I have a broad perspective on capitalism and business, and I've been rewarded obscenely for that with a life that most of y'all can't even imagine. Multiple homes, a yacht, my own plane, etc., etc., etc. But let's be honest, I am not the smartest person you've ever met. I am certainly not the hardest working. I was a mediocre student. I'm not technical at all. I can't write a word of code. Truly, my success is the consequence of spectacular luck, of birth, of circumstance, and of timing. But I am actually pretty good at a couple of things. One, I have an unusually high tolerance for risk. And the other is, I have a good sense, a good intuition about what will happen in the future. And I think that that intuition about the future is the essence of good entrepreneurship. So what do I see in our future today, you ask? I see pitchforks, as in angry mobs with pitchforks. Because people like us plutocrats, because while people like us plutocrats are living beyond the dreams of avarice, the other 99% of our fellow citizens are falling farther and farther behind. In 1980, the top 1% of Americans shared about 8% of national wealth, while the bottom 50% of Americans shared 18%. 30 years later, today, the top 1% shares over 20% of national wealth, while the bottom 50% of Americans share 12 or 13. If the trend continues, the top 1% will share over 30% of national wealth in another 30 years, while the bottom 50% of Americans will share just 6. You see, the problem isn't that we have some inequality. Some inequality is necessary for a high-functioning capitalist democracy. The problem is that inequality is at historic highs today, and it's getting worse every day. And if wealth, power, and income continue to concentrate at the very tippy top, our society will change from a capitalist democracy to a neo-feudalist rentier society like 18th century France. That was, you know, France before the revolution and the mobs with the pitchforks. So I have a message for my fellow plutocrats and zillionaires, and for anyone who lives in a gated bubble world. Wake up. Wake up. It cannot last. Because if we do not do something to fix the glaring economic inequities in our society, the pitchforks will come for us. For no free and open society can long sustain this kind of rising economic inequality. It has never happened. There are no examples. You show me a highly unequal society, and I will show you a police state or an uprising. The pitchforks will come for us if we do not address this. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And it will be terrible when they come for everyone, but particularly for people like us plutocrats. I know I must sound like some liberal do-gooder. I'm not. I'm not making a moral argument that economic inequality is wrong. What I'm arguing is that rising economic inequality is stupid and ultimately self-defeating. Rising inequality doesn't just increase our risks from pitchforks, but it's also terrible for business too. So the model for us rich guys should be Henry Ford. When Ford famously introduced the $5 day, which was twice the prevailing wage at the time, he didn't just increase the productivity of his factories. He converted exploited auto workers who were poor into a thriving middle class who could now afford to buy the products that they made. Ford intuited what we now know is true, that an economy is best understood as an ecosystem and characterized by the same kinds of feedback loops you find in a natural ecosystem. A feedback loop between customers and businesses. Raising wages increases demand, which increases hiring, which in turn increases wages and demand and profits. And that virtuous cycle of increasing prosperity is precisely what is missing from today's economic recovery. And this is why we need to put behind us the trickle-down policies that so dominate both political parties and embrace something I call middle-out economics. Middle-out economics rejects the neoclassical economic idea that economies are efficient, linear, mechanistic, that they tend towards equilibrium and fairness, and instead embraces the 21st century idea that economies are complex, adaptive, ecosystemic, that they tend away from equilibrium and toward inequality, that they're not efficient at all, but are effective if well managed. This 21st century perspective allows you to clearly see that capitalism does not work by effectively allocating existing resources. It works by effectively creating new solutions to human problems. The genius of capitalism is that it is an evolutionary solution-finding system. It rewards people for solving other people's problems. The difference between a poor society and a rich society, obviously, is the degree to which that society has generated solutions in the form of products for its citizens. The sum of the solutions that we have in our society really is our prosperity, and this explains why companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and Apple and the entrepreneurs who created those companies have contributed so much to our nation's prosperity. This 21st century perspective also makes clear that what we think of as economic growth is best understood as the rate at which we solve problems. But that rate is totally dependent upon how many problem solvers, diverse, able problem solvers we have, and thus how many of our fellow citizens actively participate, both as entrepreneurs who can offer solutions and as customers who consume them. But this maximizing participation thing doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by itself. It requires effort and investment, which is why all highly prosperous capitalist democracies are characterized by massive investments in the middle class and the infrastructure that they depend on. We plutocrats need to get this trickle-down economics thing behind us. This idea that the better we do, the better everyone else will do. It's not true. How could it be? I earn 1,000 times the median wage. But I do not buy 1,000 times as much stuff, do I? I actually bought 2 pairs of these pants, what my partner Mike calls my manager pants. I could have bought 2,000 pairs, but what would I do with them? How many haircuts can I get? How often can I go out to dinner? No matter how wealthy a few plutocrats get, we can never drive a great national economy. Only a thriving middle class can do that. There's nothing to be done, my plutocrat friends might say. Henry Ford was in a different time. Maybe we can't do some things. Maybe we can do some things. On June 19th, 2013, Bloomberg published an article I wrote called "The Capitalist Case for a $15 Minimum Wage." The good people at Forbes magazine, among my biggest admirers, called it Nick Hanauer's near insane proposal. And yet, just 350 days after that article was published, Seattle's Mayor Ed Murray signed into law an ordinance raising the minimum wage in Seattle to $15 an hour, more than double what the prevailing federal $7.25 rate is. How did this happen? Reasonable people might ask. It happened because a group of us reminded the middle class that they are the source of growth and prosperity in capitalist economies. We reminded them that when workers have more money, businesses have more customers and need more employees. We reminded them that when businesses pay workers a living wage, taxpayers are relieved of the burden of funding the poverty programs like food stamps and medical assistance and rent assistance that those workers need. We reminded them that low-wage workers make terrible taxpayers, and that when you raise the minimum wage for all businesses benefit, yet all can compete. Now, the orthodox reaction, of course, is raising the minimum wage costs jobs, right? Your politicians always echoing that trickle-down idea by saying things like, well, if you raise the price of employment, guess what happens? You get less of it. Are you sure? Because there's some contravening evidence. Since 1980, the wages of CEOs in our country have gone from about 30 times the median wage to 500 times. That's raising the price of employment. And yet, to my knowledge, I have never seen a company outsource its CEO's job, automate their job, export the job to China. In fact, we appear to be employing more CEOs and senior managers than ever before. So too for technology workers and financial services workers who earn multiples of the median wage, and yet we employ more and more of them. So clearly, you can raise the price of employment and get more of it. I know that most people think that the $15 minimum wage is this insane, risky economic experiment. We disagree. We believe that the $15 minimum wage in Seattle is actually the continuation of a logical economic policy that is allowing our city to kick your city's ass. Because you see, Washington State already has the highest minimum wage of any state in the nation. We pay all workers $9.32, which is almost 30% more than the federal minimum of $7.25, but crucially, 427% more than the federal tipped minimum of $2.13. If trickle-down thinkers were right, then Washington State should have massive unemployment. Seattle should be sliding into the ocean. And yet, Seattle is the fastest growing big city in the country. Washington State is generating small business jobs at a higher rate than any other major state in the nation. The restaurant business in Seattle, booming. Why? Because the fundamental law of capitalism is when workers have more money, businesses have more customers and need more workers. When restaurants pay restaurant workers enough so that even they can afford to eat in restaurants, That's not bad for the restaurant business. That's good for it, despite what some restaurateurs may tell you. Is it more complicated than I'm making out? Of course it is. There are a lot of dynamics at play. But can we please stop insisting that if low-wage workers earn a little bit more, unemployment will skyrocket and the economy will collapse? There is no evidence for it. The most insidious thing about trickle-down economics is not the claim that if the rich get richer, everyone is better off. It is the claim made by those who oppose any increase in the minimum wage that if the poor get richer, that will be bad for the economy. This is nonsense. So can we please dispense with this rhetoric that says that rich guys like me and my plutocrats friends made our country? We plutocrats know, even if we don't like to admit it in public, that if we had been born somewhere else, not here in the United States, we might very well be just some dude standing barefoot by the side of a dirt road selling fruit. It's not that they don't have good entrepreneurs in other places, even very, very poor places. It's just that that's all that those entrepreneurs' customers can afford. So here's an idea for a new kind of economics, a new kind of politics that I call new capitalism. Let's acknowledge that capitalism beats the alternatives, but also that the more people we include, both as entrepreneurs and as customers, the better it works. Let's by all means shrink the size of government, but not by slashing the poverty programs, but by ensuring that workers are paid enough so that they actually don't need those programs. Let's invest enough in the middle class to make our economy fairer and more inclusive, and by fairer, more truly competitive. And by more truly competitive, more able to generate the solutions to human problems that are the true drivers of growth and prosperity. Capitalism is the greatest social technology ever invented for creating prosperity in human societies if it is well managed. But capitalism, because of the fundamental multiplicative dynamics of complex systems, tends towards, inexorably, inequality, concentration, and collapse. The work of democracies is to maximize the inclusion of the many in order to create prosperity, not to enable the few to accumulate money. Government does create prosperity and growth by creating the conditions that allow both entrepreneurs and their customers to thrive. Balancing the power of capitalists like me and workers isn't bad for capitalism, it's essential to it. Programs like a reasonable minimum wage, affordable health care, paid sick leave, and the progressive taxation necessary to pay for the important infrastructure necessary to the middle class, like education, R&D. These are indispensable tools shrewd capitalists should embrace to drive growth, because no one benefits from it like us. Many economists would have you believe that their field is an objective science. I disagree. And I think that it is equally a tool that humans use to enforce and encode our social and moral preferences and prejudices about status and power. Which is why plutocrats like me have always needed to find persuasive stories to tell everyone else about why our relative positions are morally righteous and good for everyone. Like, we are indispensable, the job creators, and you are not. Like, tax cuts for us create growth, but investments in you will balloon our debt and bankrupt our great country. That we matter, that you don't. For thousands of years, these stories were called divine right. Today, we have trickle-down economics. How obviously, transparently self-serving all of this is. We plutocrats need to see that the United States of America made us, not the other way around. that a thriving middle class is the source of prosperity in capitalist economies, not a consequence of it. And we should never forget that even the best of us, in the worst of circumstances, are barefoot by the side of a dirt road selling fruit. Fellow plutocrats, I think it may be time for us to recommit to our country, to commit to a new kind of capitalism which is both more inclusive and more effective. A capitalism that will ensure that America's economy remains the most dynamic and prosperous in the world. Let's secure the future for ourselves, our children, and their children. Or alternatively, we could do nothing. Hide in our gated communities and private schools, enjoy our planes and yachts, they're fun, and wait for the pitchforks. Thank you.
Are we waiting for the pitchforks? That's what his conclusion is. If we do nothing, even the capitalists will be affected. But that history always proves itself because it always repeats. And so it happened in the past, and I'm sure it will happen again. Except this time it will be much bigger than the past because the population size is bigger. And so that backlash is going to be a major backlash when it comes. Because I don't know about you, but I don't see the politicians changing their stance. And therefore, I don't see the income inequality being reduced anytime soon. So we need to prepare for that. But history always repeats, like I said, so it will happen again. Only this time is going to be bigger than the last time. Now, I have a few minutes to go, so I'm going to still try to tackle reading this Ray Dalio piece that says, tackle inequality or face a violent revolution. And billionaire warns, we are all going to try to kill each other if wealth gap is not closed. He says billionaire investor Ray Dalio has called U.S. politicians to declare the growing wealth gap a national emergency and take urgent steps to address it or face the prospects of a violent revolution where we all going to try to kill each other. In a conversation with fellow hedge fund manager and billionaire Paul Tudor Jones at the Greenwich Economic Forum on Tuesday, the Bridgewater Associates founder echoed his previous comments and those of other billionaires who have expressed concerns about wealth disparity and a broken capitalist system. Now this is ironic. These are billionaires talking. It's not even poor people. It's billionaires are saying this. So they're getting scared of the fork coming for them. The world has gone mad and the system is broken, said Mr. Dalio, who was the highest earning hedge fund manager last year. This is now pocketing $2 billion in fees and returns on his personal stake in Bridgewater funds. So this is not no small fish. This is a billionaire, folks. The reason is it is broken. The reason it's broken is because it is not an equal opportunity system. It needs to be formed in a way that works better. Mr. Jones shared Mr. Dalio's concerns about the demise of capitalism, but said that fixing the problem is easy if public companies can be convinced to shift their focus to more than just the shareholder returns. We have 6 million employees of public companies that today do not make a living wage, said the 65-year-old founder of Tudor Investment Corporation. 50 years ago, 6.5% of corporate revenues went to shareholders. Today, that number is 13%. Mr. Jones has set up an organization called Just Capital that ranks companies on their treatment of employees. His and Mr. Dalio's comments reflect an intensifying debate among hedge fund billionaires over how to characterize and respond to wealth disparity. Leon Copperman, founder of Omega Advisors, penned a 5-page open letter to Elizabeth Warren last week attacking the Democratic presidential candidate soak the rich positions on taxes. He goes on to say that in Greenwich, Mr. Jones also sounded the alarm over the U.S. budget deficit, calling Donald Trump the greatest salesman in the history of this country for convincing the Republican Party that a 5% budget deficit adjusted for the economic strength we have right now is a reasonable proportion and one that is good government policy. If the deficit continues to grow at the current pace, the U.S. will in 10 years have exceeded the threshold where Greece encountered its recent debt crisis, he warned. An Elizabeth Warren presidency will scare the stock market, Mr. Jones said. Trudeau polled its investment staff, who said that if Ms. Warren is elected, the S&P 500 would trade at about 2,500 compared to 3,600 if Mr. Trump is re-elected. The index was 3,076 on Tuesday. So this was an article written by a billionaire hedge fund manager who pocketed $2 billion in fees and returns on his personal stake in Bridgewater Funds last year. So this is not a small fish. Very interesting times, folks. Question is, what you gonna do? Do nothing? Or will you be one of the fork holders running after the rich? That being said, my colleague came in today and he said someone he know asked him to borrow $200, and when he said he didn't have it, the person turned to him and said, I know you got it. I know you got it. So it's amazing to see what's happening in the world today. So when they perceive that you have money, I guess they will come after you, and that's what I guess the billionaires are saying here, that the trend seems to slowly be starting. Nonetheless, I want to thank you for listening. You can reach us on our Facebook page, which is SSM 98.1 Pearl FM, on our website, which is www.pearlfmradio.sx. You can watch us live in the studio from the website. Just go to the menu and go to Watch Live. You can also watch us on live in the studio on our app. You can download the app in the Google Play Store. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you again in another informative program. Bye-bye. Money, 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 money.